Summer camps, detached teenagers, masked killers, cutting objects and gallons of blood. The pinnacle of a thrill ride is a slasher movie. Slashers have a menacing beauty that rests in their simplicity as opposed to the twists and turns of so many contemporary horror movies.
Real nice surprise. You coming to visit me like this?
And in that simplicity resides a genre that has endured for many years and will undoubtedly do so for many more. Isn't there something reassuring about turning on a horror film knowing what will happen next? So here are some of the best slasher movies of all time. Without further ado, let's jump right into the video. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This could be a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Halloween, 1978. Halloween is a 1978 independent American movie that was co-written by producer Deborah Hill and directed by John Carpenter. The movie begins on the night of Halloween in 1963 in the fictitious suburb of Haddonfield, where a 6-year-old boy named Michael Myers fatally stabs his older sister Judith, who was babysitting him, with a chef's knife. Since then, Michael has been detained at Smith's Grove Mental Asylum for 15 years, and the entire time remaining silent. Michael's psychotherapist, Dr. Samuel Loomis, shows up at the mental asylum on October the 30th, 1978, to accompany Michael to a trial for a hearing in which Loomis intends to see Michael sentenced to life in prison. On his journey back to Haddonfield, after making his way out of Smith's Grove and stealing Loomis's car, Michael kills a mechanic in exchange for his boiler suit. When he reaches there, he robs a hardware shop for ropes, knives, and a blank white mask before moving on to find his next victim. Halloween is an excellent example of a slow, creeping horror film. Yes, it sometimes features slasher titillation, but most of the running time is devoted to the gradual induction of anxiety, paranoia, and dread. It's a really intriguing movie which isn't exclusively focused on graphic violence or gore. Instead, it makes excellent use of lighting and shadows, terrific editing, a memorable background score, and a nearly otherworldly villain. You're never quite sure who the murderer is because of the thin line it treads between a mortal antagonist and a demonic entity. A Nightmare on Elm Street, 1984. A Nightmare on Elm Street was directed by Wes Craven and produced by Robert Shea. The movie revolves around the psychopath called Freddy Krueger, who murders many kids in the early 1980s using a glove that has straight razor blades fastened to the fingers. An outraged mob of parents whose children Krueger tortured and killed burns Krueger alive in the boiler room where he worked when a judge makes a stupid ruling that frees him. The children of the parents who killed Krueger have frightening dreams about a burnt guy wearing a glove with blades on the fingers years after his passing. Their dreams are plagued by the ghost of Fred Krueger, and when Nancy's best friend Tina suddenly drops dead while fighting Krueger in a dream, Nancy figures out that she must find a way to put an end to the horrible psychopath's reign of terror, or risk never sleeping again. It has endured the test of time and is undoubtedly one of the best horror movies ever made. A lot of credit for it goes to Wes Craven's aesthetic and the memorable soundtrack connected to the film. The psychology of having one's own subconscious hold the murderer is astounding. It creates a mythical universe rather than just a lot of pointless gore or jump scares by leaning more towards horror fantasy than mere horror. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974. Working with Kim Henkel on the screenplay, Tobe Hooper produced and directed The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The movie narrates the story of 5 friends who are traveling across Texas's backroads in 1974 in search of their grandfather's ransacked gravesite. Sally Hardesty and a disabled brother Franklin are 2 of them. They run into an unsavory hitchhiker who uses a sinister-looking knife to cut both Franklin and himself. The others successfully remove the hitchhiker from the car, but they are soon obliged to stop and walk over to a tiny neighboring home in search of fuel. None of them are aware that the hideous Leatherface and his nasty, deranged brood of cannibalistic psychopaths reside in this house. The teenagers are brutally slaughtered by Leatherface one at a time. Soon after arriving uninvited at Leatherface's house, Sally runs away into the night to get away from the deranged cannibal and his chainsaw. The aesthetic of the film is its strongest point. The film's grimy home video, a little too realistic vibe, adds to its unsettling quality. The startling and recognizable high-pitched sound of the camera flash at the opening of the movie serves as an example of the terrific sound design. A special note should be made of the terrifying sounds and laughs at the dinner party scene. Friday the 13th, 1980. Victor Miller wrote the screenplay for the movie Friday the 13th, which Sean S. Cunningham both produced and directed. Jason, a small kid, perished in a lake not far from Camp Crystal Lake in 1957. The very next year, an unidentified assailant kills 2 camp counselors simultaneously. Fires and poor water prevents the camp from reopening in 1962. In spite of the warnings of a crazy old guy, Steve Christie ultimately reopens Camp Crystal Lake in 1980 with the assistance of a few new counselors. As an unknown stalker prowls the region, the killings resume. Possibly the same individual who had murdered the 2 camp counselors in 1958 is back for more. The last counselor finally meeting the murderer serves as the narrative's finale, a legendary slasher horror movie that helped many slasher films in the future. Even though the major narrative and plotline were implied by the juvenile sex, nudity, and slasher mentality of these movies, the rich backstory and unsettling who and why of Jason Voorhees' life contribute to the addictive fascination about his ghastly present. Many horror fans are drawn to the film because of the gore and the spectacular effects of the era. Even though you know everyone will die, the way he slaughters his prey varies, and he uses various weapons which keep things interesting. Scream 1996. Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson collaborated on the script for the horror movie Scream. A masked assassin stalks a quiet California neighborhood, turning it into carnage. Sidney Prescott and her companions begin receiving some absurd phone calls a year after Sidney's mother's death. They subsequently discover that the calls are being made by a fanatical serial murderer seeking retribution, who is dressed in a huge black robe and a white face mask. Gate Weathers, a reporter for the local tabloid, is investigating to identify the murderer. She warns Sidney that he may be the same person who had killed her mother the previous year. She will discover who is hiding behind the mask when night comes. Look no further than Scream if you're seeking an intelligent, self-aware horror movie. The movie has been one of the most influential horror films ever, and it came out at a time when the horror genre was on the verge of extinction. It was a breath of fresh air, offering a distinctive, imaginative cinematic experience, together with a strong script by Kevin Williamson that brought a self-referential remark on the horror genre while also embracing its cliches. Wes Craven did a fantastic job of maintaining the mystery aura from the beginning to the end and heightening the suspense with every scene. Wrong Turn 2003. The movie begins with Chris Finn, who is traveling through the West Virginia mountains on his route to a job interview. When a chemical leak occurs, he chooses to take an alternative route, a deserted dirt track in the middle of nowhere, because he's running low on time. Then, by mistake, he strikes a car that is standing in the center of the road. He later runs upon a bunch of buddies who are out hiking. Among them is Jesse, who has become lost on the highway. A trio of cannibalistic mountain men who have been terribly deformed by years of inbreeding live in a terrifying house hidden in the West Virginia woods. This is where, from the group of buddies, 2 individuals remain in the car while the other group searches for assistance. They later discover this cottage while exploring the woods. Then, in a desperate attempt to escape alive, they run for their lives through the forest. The film features endearing characters, is suspenseful, and has frightening cannibals and an eerie atmosphere. When they peek out of the watchtower and realize they are entirely surrounded by forests, it is terrifying. It doesn't seem cheap because it is well directed. There is a lot of action and it is all quite pleasant.
Karen, are you alright?
Child's Play 1988. Tom Holland directed Child's Play, which was based on a story by Don Mancini and had a screenplay by Holland, Don Mancini, and John Lafayette. Young Andy Barclay requests a good guy doll from his mother for his birthday after seeing a TV ad for one. Andy's mother and a friend find a hawker selling one for a cheap price at work, and she purchases it. She is unaware that the specific doll is possessed by the ghost of Charles Lee Ray, aka the Lakeshore Strangler, who perished at the hands of the police in the previous evening and who had his spirit voodooed into the doll. Even worse, Andy's body is being taken over by Charles Lee Ray's spirit, which is seeking to escape the doll's body. The movie offers a novel, contemporary perspective that is relatable to today's youth. Voice actor Mark Hamill does a fantastic job as Chucky. It is so entertaining to see him gradually lose control of his robotic consciousness and transform into Ultron by the third act of the movie. We absolutely adored those movies, even if it wasn't quite as terrifying as the first Chucky. Anybody in the character's shoes on screen would be afraid. In the end, it was a brilliant reboot for a brand that had grown stale due to movies like The Cult of Chucky and The Seed of Chucky, both of which were obvious cash grabs.
The good Lord will protect us.
Hatchet, 1926. Hatchet is a slasher movie written and directed by Adam Green. We come across a mismatched group of visitors set out on a boat tour of the eerie Louisiana bayous, where they discover the frightening legend of the terribly deformed man known as Victor Crowley, who was inadvertently slain with a hatchet by his own father. The group makes a valiant effort to flee the swamp with their lives and all of their pieces, but as the boat sinks, it turns out that the ghost story is true. Hatchet is a fantastic horror film that features a lot of gore, which is naturally due to Kane Hodder's portrayal of Victor Crowley. There is literally enough blood and gore in this movie to refloat the Titanic, and it has some of the finest killings in slasher film history. This is a fantastic classic horror movie that never gets old, gruesome and bloody all at once.
Oh, shit.
The Cabin in the Woods, 2011. The Cabin in the Woods is a movie produced by Joss Whedon, directed by Whedon and Goddard, and directed by Drew Goddard in his directorial debut. A group of 5 adolescents depart for a weekend getaway to a remote cottage in the woods. When they get there, they discover that they are completely alone and have no way to contact the outside world. They naturally descend to see as the cellar door flea opens. They unearth a strange collection of artifacts and collectibles, but when one of the ladies, Dana, reads from a book, she unleashes a band of vicious zombie murderers. But there is a lot more going on than it first appears. One of the best movies ever made, and not just because it ingeniously draws inspiration from H.P. Lovecraft and other authors to describe the terror that lies behind the familiar horror. The less you know about The Cabin in the Woods before seeing it, the better. It's excellently written, produced, performed, scored, and shot. It completely transcends the horror subgenre and gives a sweet glimpse into mythology from different civilizations.
What's the matter, Trevor? Scared of something?
Candyman, 1992. Candyman was written and directed by Bernard Rose. A student named Helen Lyle decides to focus her thesis on local myths and folklore. She explores a neighborhood in town and discovers the story of the Candyman, a one-armed character who is said to emerge when his name is said 5 times in front of a mirror. Helen, of course, doesn't believe any of it, but the locals are genuinely terrified. A string of horrific killings starts when she obeys their advice and launches her inquiry into the locations where he is supposed to show up. Candyman epitomizes a slasher film. It is ominous, surreal, dreamy, and of course violent. But it's much more than that. It challenges tropes and poses psychological questions. This 1992 cult classic, which received many excellent reviews and spread into a whole trilogy with a remake on the horizon, has remained one of the most influential and thrilling slasher movies of all time, thanks to the excellent portrayals by Virginia Madsen and Tony Todd. X, 2022. X is a film written, directed, produced and edited by T. West. Set in 1979, burlesque owner and aspirational producer Wayne assembles a team of young directors to shoot their film, The Farmer's Daughters. Wayne is determined to pave the way for a new sort of cinema and revolutionize the adult film genre. Wayne is sure that they will all become famous soon, since his girlfriend Maxine, who aspires to be an actress, is a part of the movie. The gang quickly sets to work as they arrive at the carefully chosen spot, an isolated cabin in rural Texas. that Wayne rented from the spooky owners Howard and his wife Pearl. However, a subtle undertone of evil sends shivers down the spine when imaginative filmmaker RJ begins filming sensual sequences directly in front of their white-haired hosts. X delivers a gut-punching display of blatant excess, immorality and hedonism. It has outstanding production quality and is a rather novel concept, and is feasible. Although it is unsettling, isn't that the point? T. West, the filmmaker, is a master of the cinematic storyteller's craft. He masterfully weaves and intertwines the narrative's strands while keeping our emotions closely tuned to events as the plot develops. It contains excellent sound effects and great music, and it is atmospheric. The majority of the casting is perfect, but the elderly evil couple's lavish prosthetics make them appear almost inhuman. This is an unnecessary distraction, but it will also provide just the right amount of kitsch to soften what would otherwise be nearly intolerable to watch.
I bet the rest of the boys will be interested in seeing you.
Sleepaway Camp, 1983. Robert Hiltzig, who also acted as executive producer, wrote the screenplay for Sleepaway Camp and also directed and produced it. The movie narrates the story of shy, gloomy Angela, who relocates to live with her quirky aunt Martha and vigilant cousin Ricky after a terrible boating tragedy claimed the lives of her family. Martha brings the kids to Camp Arawak one summer. Several campers lose their life in strange, progressively horrifying accidents not long after they arrive. Why are these murders being committed by this insane person? One of the most stunning climaxes in American film history is when the killer's name is revealed. The conclusion alone is worth $1 million. This was very innovative at the time. It addressed issues that a majority of films of the time, regardless of genre, wouldn't have ever considered addressing. For such, it merits a lot of praise. You might initially think this is simply another unremarkable slasher movie, but in the last moments it delivers a sucker punch to the stomach that instantly elevates it to the status of one of the greatest cult masterpieces of all time, regardless of genre. High Tension, 2003. Alexandre Aja and Gregory Lavasseur collaborated on the script for the 2003 French movie High Tension, which was also directed by Aja. The movie tells the story of best friends Marie and Alexia, both French college students, who travel to Alexia's parents' isolated home to study in the hopes of enjoying a relaxed weekend. The girls, however, are unaware that a vicious, deranged killer prowls the area, slashing defenseless victims for his diabolical delight. A brutal carnage is soon started when the enigmatic murderer suddenly smashes into the pitch-black farmhouse in the middle of the night. Since the crazy man is now imprisoning the helpless Alexia, Marie is trapped in a dangerous game of cat and mouse and must use every tool at her disposal to liberate her bruised, bloodied partner. The movie was released in the UK as Switchblade Romance. Fans of the movie are always debating the conclusion. There are many viewers who fall on either side of the issue, making it a love it or hate it type of thing. High Tension is a nail-biter that keeps the tension high and flips everything upside down in the last 10 minutes. Although the movie enjoys its blood and gore, it is not your typical splatter flick. Both the storyline and Alexandre Aja's directing are really intelligent. Intruder, 1989. Lawrence Bender contributed to the writing and production of the movie Intruder, which was written and directed by Scott Spiegel. The movie begins with Jennifer Ross, a cashier at the supermarket, who experiences harassment from her ex-boyfriend Craig Peterson while working the night shift. The other employees look out for her, and they soon find out that the supermarket will be purchased by the city government from the co-owners Danny and Bill Roberts. They lock the store, make a bonus promise to the staff, and asks them to slash prices by 50% in order to move the remaining stock in the coming days. But soon after, a masked invader begins a night-long killing rampage, killing them all one by one. Although The Intruder appears to be a straightforward slasher on paper, it is really rather amusing. A clever narrative that is really nicely paced succeeds on all levels. Most actors do good work and the killer's identity is kept efficiently veiled. But the killings are where Intruder truly shines. Being a low-budget horror, there are certain drawbacks, like obvious transitions from a human to a dummy, but they are so much fun that it doesn't matter. Psycho, 1960. Alfred Hitchcock is the director of the movie Psycho. Based on Robert Bloch's 1959 novel of the same name, Joseph Stefano wrote the screenplay. Marion Crane, an office worker in Phoenix, has had enough of how life has mistreated her. She must see her partner Sam during lunch breaks, and they are unable to get married since Sam must pay the majority of his wealth in alimony. Marion's job gives her the authority to deposit $40,000 on Friday. Marion leaves town and makes her way to Sam's California store after realizing that she has the chance to accept the money and start a new life. She exits the main highway and enters the Bates Motel after a long and exhausting trip while being trapped in a storm. But after spending just one night there, she realizes that choosing this particular hotel was a mistake, since she meets the mother of the young, sad manager who is a relentless maniac. In 1960, when people were mostly terrified by ghosts, aliens or monsters, Psycho was a remarkably innovative horror film. However, humans were where the actual fear resided. That's why it was novel and invigorating, and the decision to cast a male as the antagonist in a horror slasher was one that the movie's producers doubted. The Burning, 1981. The Burning, directed by Tony Maylam, narrates the incident where a bunch of camp-going youngsters decide it is essential to play a practical joke on Cropsey, the nasty and drunken caretaker of Camp Backfoot. After the prank fails and Cropsey spends 5 years in the hospital, he is finally released to return to society. But this time he is a completely different person on the inside and out. For the first time in 5 years, Cropsey is back in society and feels more than forced to see some young people at Camp Stonewater, which is located only across the street from his former stomping grounds. Cropsey is a very well-designed antagonist, and the way he is depicted, always in shadow, in points of view views, and only seeing his torso and below, makes him even more menacing before we discover the horrifying mask created by Tom Savini. The Burning, which is comparable to some movies like My Bloody Valentine and The Town That Dreaded Sundown, is an incredibly underappreciated movie that every fan of classic 1980s horror should watch. The Prowler, 1981. The Prowler, often referred to as Rosemary's Killer, is a movie that was directed by Joseph Zito. The murder of Roy and his lover Frances Rosemary Chatham with a rake on June 20th, 1945, the night of the graduation ball at Avalon Bay, goes unsolved. Pam MacDonald, the student, plans a new graduation dance on June 28th, since Major Chatham, who is wheelchair-bound and severely ill, has forbidden any celebration for 35 years. Deputy Mark London is in charge and keeping the area secure while local Sheriff George Fraser is away fishing. Mark and Pam look for the serial killer's hiding location once he starts attacking the students. The film has many positive aspects, including some of Tom Savini's greatest work and violent, masterfully executed gore. Vicky Dawson is a fantastic last girl. She's incredibly charming and has an Amy Steele-like appearance. There is some good suspense in the chase and stock moments as well.
Not anymore. Game over.
Saw, 2004. Leigh Whannell wrote the screenplay for the movie Saw, which was directed by James Wan in his first feature-length project. Adam Stanheidt, a freelance photographer, and Dr. Lawrence Gordon wake up in a rundown restroom with no memory of how they got there. After listening to the tapes they find in their pockets, the two guys quickly understand they have been caught up in the famed Jigsaw Killer's game. At first it appears impossible to escape, but Adam and Lawrence quickly realize they might have a chance. But at what price? And are they alone by themselves? Saw, a horror film with a deranged enough narrative to imply that its writers might have benefited from intensive therapy while they were young, has an unquestionably creative idea and deft plot devices that elevate it many notches beyond the standard slasher film level. This feature debut from filmmaker James Wan should be fairly highly respected by lovers of the genre and could generate decent returns on video, if not theatrically. My Bloody Valentine, 1981. George Mihalka and John Beard are the creators of the Canadian horror movie My Bloody Valentine. The young folks of the little mining town of Valentine's Bluffs are planning a celebration for Valentine's Day. 6 workers were underground during an explosion in the mine some decades prior. Only one, Harry Warden, lived, but in a crazy state. After being sent to a psychiatric hospital, Warden escapes and kills people he believes are to be blamed for the mining tragedy. The town's residents believe Harry Warden is responsible for the recent spate of horrible killings. The atmosphere of a tiny village is beautifully portrayed in this film. It does a far better job with its characters than the typical horror or slasher movie. The settings are incredibly ethereal. It has a straightforward plot, is properly directed and scripted, and has a fantastic backdrop, doesn't linger too long, and has some very excellent killings. It is true that some of the deaths in this are rather disturbing, and the gore is just incredible. You're Next, 2011. Simon Barrett wrote the script for You're Next, while Adam Wingard directed and edited it. The Davisons are an affluent, upper-class family who are also alienated from one another. Aubrey and Paul Davison choose to invite their 4 children and the significant others of their children to their weekend estate to celebrate their wedding anniversary in an effort to repair their fractured family bonds. The festivities get off to a shaky start, but when crossbow-wielding intruders wearing animal masks suddenly strike, the Davisons must band together or perish. The attackers are not aware that one of the Davisons has a history of retaliating, though. This graphic tale of predators turning prey was masterfully directed by Adam Wingard, also known for the feature film Death Note, based on the Japanese anime of the same name. You're Next achieves the delicate balance between the emotions of a family gathering and the unsettling menace from the woods beyond. It is a masterfully timed home invasion slasher with clever surprises, a feast for aficionados of horror. I Know What You Did Last Summer, 1997. 4 friends accidentally kill a man on the side of the road at night, and out of fear, they decide to throw the body into the water. They all attempt to settle down once more a year later, but one of the bodies gets a letter in the mail that says, "I know what you did last summer." As each body receives their individual reminder, the pals eventually come to terms with what they had been most afraid of, that someone knows what occurred that night and is now seeking retribution. It sticks out because many of the characters act realistically and convincingly. The idea is intriguing, and it's best illustrated when the main character discovers the message that reads, "I know what you did last summer," because in addition to it being creepy, it also hits her right where it hurts. It's obvious that she never fully recovered from what she and her friends did, and that she has been damaged ever since.
Oh my god, you're never gonna believe what I just heard on the radio.
Terrifier, 2016. Terrifier is an independent slasher flick directed by Damien Leone. On Halloween, Tara and Dawn, 2 friends, leave a party after getting drunk and make their way back to Dawn's car when they see an odd man dressed as a clown. They are followed into a local pizzeria by the man, Art the Clown. After a little while, Art is hurriedly removed from the restaurant by the owner for smearing his own excrement all over the restroom walls. Tara contacts her sister Vicky to come fetch the girls when they notice that one of Dawn's car's tires has been cut. However, the ominous clown goes further. Will the 3 ladies manage to flee the approaching disaster? Unnervingly effective, the tactics of Art the Clown are countless, and he is over the top, disgustingly terrifying. You'll be on the edge of your seat the entire while you're watching this cat and mouse slasher thriller, wondering whether anybody is going to make it out alive. One aspect that really stood out to me and set this apart from previous films of a similar kind was that Art's obsession with murdering was just that, an obsession, and he wasn't fixated on any one specific method. Art will take advantage of everything available to him and appears to be highly interested in how each one operates. Maniac, 1980. William Lustig directed Maniac, which was scripted by C.A. Rosenberg. Frank Zito grieves the loss of his mother, who perished in a vehicle accident years earlier. Even though she mistreated him and gained money by selling her body, Frank still misses her. In an effort to deter her from leaving him and to change her wicked ways, he murders young ladies and mounts their heads on mannequins that he places all throughout his apartment. He approaches and makes friends with photographer Anna De Antoni after she snaps a photo of him in the park. He She has been searching for a mother, but is she the real deal or just another hoax? Maniac takes viewers on a nasty, gory and horrifying trip into the mind of a murderous psychopath. As the emotionally troubled Frank, who is plagued by childhood memories of his mother's maltreatment of him, Spinell provides a brilliant performance. Frank is now a first-class Looney Tune as a result of his poor childhood. As mentioned before, he kills women and takes their scalps home to put them on the mannequins he maintains in his apartment. The Hills Have Eyes, 2006. Directed by Alexandra Aya, it centers around a couple driving through the desert with their 3 children, son-in-law and infant granddaughter as they celebrate their 30th wedding anniversary. They make do with what they have, despite the rest of the family's opinion that there are many better and more appropriate ways to celebrate an anniversary. However, things change when a dubious gas station attendant tells them about a shortcut that goes through a number of desert hills. They quickly come to the realization that they are not alone and that the hills do, in fact, have eyes. The movie opens with a suspenseful introduction and some really unsettling opening titles. It has a foreboding and unsettling tone from right away, and the suspense only grows throughout the movie. The soundtrack for the movie was a staple of the 2000s horror genre, which enhanced the viewing experience. Furthermore, the sound design was strong and truly stood out in several instances. Slumber Party Massacre, 1982. Directed and co-written by Amy Holden Jones, Slumber Party Massacre narrates the incident that takes place with a high school senior who is 18 years old and decides to have a slumber party after her parents leave her at home. The new girl, who is much better at basketball than some of the invited guests, encounters conflict with them and decides to stay at home, which is conveniently located across the street from the host's residence. The partygoers start to experience an attrition issue, and the only person who can assist them is the new girl. In the meantime, a power tool wielding serial killer who killed 5 people has escaped and is on the run. He ultimately finds his way to the party. The witty language is what really shines in this film. In a genre that is sometimes mocked for its lifeless cookie-cutter characters whose only function is to be slasher meat, Rita Mae Brown does an incredible job in giving the characters life. The movie features terrific gore and is at times quite violent, but it also has a strong undercurrent of sly comedy.
Who is it?
Black Christmas, 1974. The movie was written by Roy Moore and was directed by Bob Clark. The movie begins with some sorority sisters preparing for the Christmas break as it approaches, but the odd anonymous phone calls are starting to make them uneasy. They contact the police when Claire vanishes, but they don't seem really concerned. While everything is going on, Jess is considering getting an abortion, but Peter, her boyfriend, strongly opposes her decision. The discovery of a 13-year-old girl dead in the park prompts the police to start paying attention. Will they be able to stop a female sorority massacre in time after setting up a wire trap of the sorority house? Director Bob Clark used one of the most widely circulated urban tales as the basis for a genre classic that would become the predecessor of the stalk and slash cycle, before Jamie Blanks transforms famous urban stories into a theme for his typical slasher franchise. There are significant parallels between this and Halloween, including infamous but unsubstantiated rumors that Carpenter's movie was really based on a never-produced idea that Clark had previously launched as a follow-up to his 1974 Sleeper. Happy Death Day, 2017. Directed by Christopher Landon and written by Scott Lobdell, Happy Death Day revolves around Tree Glebman, an egotistical college student who wakes up in the morning of her birthday with a lousy hangover at the dormitory of a guy whose name she can't quite remember after a night of heavy drinking and partying. Tree is going about her day unaware that everything she is experiencing or will experience is a bizarre deja vu of a world that will repeat itself until her gruesome murder at night by a masked psychopath. As a self-centered college beauty and pampered sorority sister who runs the campus before being fatally murdered by a masked madman on her way to a surprise birthday celebration, Jessica Roth is hilariously witty and astute in the role. When this campus hottie realizes she is repeatedly experiencing her birthday, trying to avoid death each time but continually running into her attacker, fate deals her an interesting hand. mind. The writer, Scott Lobdell, isn't attempting to hide the fact that this is a slasher version of Groundhog Day. Rather, he is open about the parallels, even reveling in them, while exploring all the potential outcomes such a scenario may bring.
Come down and help me clean this up.
Freaky 2020. Directed by Christopher Landon, the movie revolves around Millie Kessler, a 17-year-old student who spends her days navigating high school and the cruel conduct of the popular crowd. When she is revealed to be the latest victim of the Butcher, a well-known serial murderer in the town, her senior year becomes the least of her worries. When the Butcher and Millie switch bodies as a result of the magical knife, the scared adolescent learns she has just under a day to reclaim her identity before she eternally assumes the look of a middle-aged lunatic. The killing starts right when you begin to assume it's just another basic adolescent angst, drinking, sex-hungry movie. They were not simply graphic, but also quite imaginative. The movie never takes itself too seriously because it just understands what it is. Plus, it was quite wonderful to witness cruel bullies die in such horrifying ways. More significantly, you should see this because of Vince Vaughn. You have a man that is 6 feet 5 inches tall, moving about like a teenage girl. It was just plain entertaining from the way he spoke to his subtle body language. Stage Fright, aka Aquarius, 1987. The Italian slasher movie Stage Fright is helmed by Michael Soavi. Dancer Alicia strains her ankle while practicing for a musical show in a theatre, and costume designer Betty rushes her to the hospital. The location is a psychiatric hospital, yet a doctor attends to Alicia's ankle. When they get back to the theatre, Irving Wallace, a deadly psychopath, escapes by hiding in Betty's vehicle. Alicia discovers Betty's body after he had murdered her outside the theatre. They call the police, and the producer Ferrari and the director Peter decide to use the press to promote the show. With the promise of further compensation, he rewrites the script and casts 6 performers and actresses to begin rehearsing right away for the premiere. He requests that Corinne, an actress, lock the theatre and bury the keys. Irving Wallace, however, breaks into the theatre and immediately begins committing crimes. Will the serial killer be stopped? A chilling homicidal dance performance with amazing saxophone playing and a killer wearing an owl mask kicks off Stage Fright. One could assume that everything that happens after this would be dull. That would be wrong. The events that follow this sequence are even more astounding. The camera work, cinematography, soundtrack, and the film's violent, cruel deaths, some of which horror fans consider to be among the most savage slayings in the slasher subgenre, are its most notable features. The fact that it is a huge 1980s cheese fest and not a movie to be taken seriously is what makes it so great.
Leslie!
Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon, 2006. Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon is a movie directed by Scott Glosserman. The supernatural murderers portrayed in well-known slasher flicks are genuine in this world, where the film was shot as a documentary. Leslie Vernon is getting ready to join the ranks of previous slasher villains as Taylor Gentry, a female journalist, and her 2 cameramen observe. Leslie got his name from a folktale about a youngster who murdered his family and was thrown into a river by enraged locals. Initially claiming to be the avenging ghost of the murdered kid, he then reveals himself to be an everyday person called Leslie Mancuso, who must use mundane methods in place of supernatural ones, hinting that this is how all other murders in his line of business operate. The main character, Leslie Vernon, guides our production crew through every step of how he executes the classic horror movie killings, making the film, above all else, a superb horror comedy. In essence, it's an investigation of the design of most scary movie sequences. How the murderer manages to let all the other promiscuous youths in the area know that there is a murderer on the loose and still manages to pick them off one by one. How the killer always has the ideal weapons accessible while the sufferer is unable to locate anything to protect himself or herself. How the doors slam shut at exactly the right moment. How the killer manages always to have the perfect weapons. Alice, Sweet Alice, 1976. Alfred Soule co-wrote and directed the psychological slasher movie Alice, Sweet Alice, which was originally named Communion. The troubled 12-year-old rebel Alice Pages resides with her younger sister Karen and the estranged mother Catherine, who shows more affection for Karen than Alice. A woman wearing a spooky mask and a yellow St. Michael's garment strangles Karen during her first communion. The police's top suspect is Alice, who enters wearing the veil she claims to have discovered on the floor. Despite the objections of her parents and their friend Father Tom, Catherine accuses Alice of stabbing her sister many times in the leg and has her taken for a psychological examination. However, Alice's father, Dominic, recognizes evidence that would demonstrate Alice's innocence. Alice, Sweet Alice is a subtle yet brilliant thriller that perfectly complements the best horror of the 1970s. Despite the little resources Alfred Soule had at his disposal, his picture doesn't appear antiquated like many others, and the impact it had on the slasher subgenre is incredible. It is, in reality, a thriller with just a little extra. Who murdered little Karen Pages when she was receiving her first communion? For much of the entire duration of the movie, this conundrum with a seemingly simple solution keeps you engaged, and, more importantly, terrified. Unfortunately, a few dull moments and uninteresting dialogues cause the tale to lose some of its punch around the hour. Fortunately, Soule quickly picks up where he left off and gives us a very magnificent conclusion that even Hitchcock would like. Initiation, 2020. At a homecoming party, Kylie, a sorority member, is discovered alone and unconscious in a room with Bo, Dylan, and Wes, 3 members of Sigma Nu Pi. She receives nasty social media mockery the next morning. Shailene, a sister sorority member, refers Kylie to Ellery, another sorority member. She then goes to Ellery for assistance. In light of the fact that Wes is her brother and has previously been accused of sexual assault, Ellery decides to look into the matter. West is killed by an unidentified assailant, and Dylan and Bo find his body. The university chancellor, Van Horn, elevates West in the days that follow by highlighting his swimming skill and unrealized potential. Detective Sandra Fitzgerald and Officer Rico Martinez look into the matter, and it's the latter who learns that Van Horn covered up Wes's prior instance of sexual assault. Soon, the unidentified killer also kills Dylan and Bo. Will the murderer get caught before he kills more students? Initiation is a pretty unusual movie. On the surface, it appears to be simply another clueless adolescent social media slasher. However, after watching it, you'll see that the film takes its time creating its characters and giving them actual problems to deal with. These factors worked together to create a movie that was highly unexpected. The lead actress, in particular, gives a strong performance. Additionally, the gore is fantastic.
This isn't who I am. This isn't me.
There's Someone Inside Your House, 2021. Patrick Bryce directed and Henry Gayden wrote the screenplay for There's Someone Inside Your House. Makani, a high school student, relocates to a tiny town in Nebraska with the intention of starting over and letting go of the unpleasant past. However, as graduation day approaches, a slew of gruesome killings take place as an unnamed lunatic intent on revealing everyone's personal secrets haunts Makani's classmates. One thing is certain: as the merciless masked assassin continues to splatter innocent blood, Makani and her pals must identify the perpetrator before they perish in this nail-biting cat-and-mouse game. Can they catch the murderer? This has a really powerful beginning, that much is certain, which brings to mind the fact that many producers prefer it when their films have a strong beginning to interest the audience and convince them to follow along for the voyage. This does not have a significant reveal or a powerful lead, but it does remain vicious and gruesome throughout. The cast we receive is good, and the film's concept is deserving of attention, but it can only carry it so far. Overall, a respectable attempt with a noteworthy impact. Fear Street Trilogy, 2021. Leigh Yaniak, the director of this American horror film series, took his cue from R.L. Stine's Fear Street book series. Without a doubt, the market was eager for the next major horror series after over 80 million copies of the book were sold. The 3 films in the series each depict an occurrence that happens in Shadyside, a tiny town in one of 3 distinct years. Let's get started now. The first film opens in 1994 as a group of young people from Sunnyside and Shadyside, two distinct communities, argue over trivial issues. As the film proceeds, weird events take place and a number of victims are assaulted and killed by a serial killer. They show us events from the year 1978 as we advance to the following film. You might wonder, why this year? This is the only instance in which the serial killer survivor is present. In a Shadyside summer camp, we come across a brand new group of kids who are likewise interested in solving the riddle but are unable to do so. In the third film, we are finally transported back to 1666, the year when it all started. We eventually get to meet Sarah Fear at the same year as the town's first serial murder assault. The protagonist discovers the true nature of the curse during this year. The Last Matinee, 2020. The Last Matinee is a Spanish-language horror movie that Maximiliano Contenti directed. The Last Matinee is a slick and gory film that is primarily set in a big movie theater in Montevideo, Uruguay in 1993. The movie successfully employs all the cliches from a straightforward basis. Anna takes over the running for the evening so she can focus on studying for an important exam and sends her ill father home from his work as a cinema projectionist. The next show is a horror film and the theater is silent and sparsely populated. As long as she has the piece she wants, she may supervise the movie screening while studying. She and the few customers inside are unfortunate because a guy enters and begins killing everyone. It's very straightforward compared to what you would imagine, which is unexpectedly uplifting. Isn't that interesting? A strange man is killing many people at a movie theater till the last female is compelled to confront him. The Last Matinee employs certain cliches while ignoring others and makes the ones it does use work in the movie's favor. A nice place to start is with the characters, especially the murderer's victims. Each person receives just enough here to really feel significant rather than just another anybody. They all matter and make for a far more fascinating viewing, whether it be the youngster trying to get lucky with the girl he spotted on the bus, the couple out on a date, or the child who sneaked in to see the horror film, or the annoying usher. Random Acts of Violence, 2019. Based on the 2010 graphic novel of the same name, written by Jimmy Palmiotti and Justin Gray and drawn by Giancarlo Caracuzzo, Random Acts of Violence is a 2019 horror movie. Producing and directing the movie was Jay Baruchel, who also co-wrote the script with Jesse Chabot. The movie centers on Todd Walkley, a cartoonist whose creations serve as the basis for several killings that actually happen. A comic book named Slasher Man, created by Todd Walkley and his publisher Ezra, launches their respective careers. They go to the area where Slasher Man had caused chaos 20 years ago as part of a publicity tour to herald the release of their final issue. Upon their arrival, a number of fresh killings take place. These murders closely resemble those in Todd's Slasherman comics. Concerning the identity of the enigmatic killer, speculation and suspicion grow. It examines our psychological preoccupation and fascination with human violence, and a comic book depicting violence, how we desire violence on film, in comic books, in stories, and in novels, as well as how the desire and fantasy can come to life in reality. How does one balance everyday life with that which appears in a comic book? It was very well written and very well directed. Comics feature all forms of violence, even protests that take place in real life. But what is the proper balance between the two? Hellfest 2018. In the beginning, Hellfest is described as a traveling Halloween-themed amusement park. During one of the mazes, an adolescent girl from Cincinnati is seen being separated from her group. A distinguished individual, known only as the Other, confronts her there. The man who had been pursuing her and her group of companions all night is recognized by her as the Other. The girl is attacked by the Other, who then hangs her after stabbing her in the belly. The corpse of the young girl seems to mix in with the other props as the Other departs. Do the killings end there? The film is amusing enough to pass as a slasher movie. It is off to a good start with the opening encounter in the maze, where he stalks the unwitting victim who's tired of the guy following her and then ties her up in the exhibit. And the later scenes inside the carnival are made all the more fun by the ability to take the setup of the carnival into fun directions. You get the impression that the park's horrors genuinely allow you to live vicariously. Bright lights, imaginative creatures, and rides all contribute to the atmosphere. Haunt, 2019. Directed by Brian Becks and Scott Wood, Haunt narrates the story of Harper and Bailey, roommates in Carbondale, Illinois, who go to a party together on Halloween night when they run across Angela and Mallory. The group meets two lads named Nathan and Evan at a local pub. Harper thinks she has been followed all night by a man wearing a devil mask. The group enters a haunted house attraction. Before being permitted inside, they must surrender their cell phones and sign liability waivers. The armholes are discovered by Angela, Bailey and Nathan after they become trapped in the maze. When Bailey reaches inside, a straight razor wounds her arm. Along with that, she mistakenly loses the ring Harper's mother had given her. Harper and Evan lose Mallory. They watch a performer impaling Mallory with a hot fire poker while donning a witch mask when they reunite with the others. Haunt covers the same ground as Hellfest in terms of theme, yet it differs enough to find its own niche. There are several amusing concepts that they don't overuse, allowing them to remain novel and be developed in sequels. Most viewers will feel at ease with this title because the movie has several features that are common to previous horror films. Happy Death Day to You, 2019. The spunky sorority sister Tree Glebman is in the same college dorm after surviving the absurd but seriously life-threatening events of Happy Death Day and is grateful to be alive. Ryan, Carter's roommate, asserts that he is repeating the same absurd day this time around because a psychotic killer with a single tooth and a large kitchen knife has been killing Ryan on a regular basis. Under those conditions, Tree is forced to start over, caught in a bloody time loop that is all too familiar, if she makes another heroic but fruitless attempt to take on the task. How many deaths stand between Tree and a birthday that is genuinely joyful? The movie is surprisingly enjoyable. It is undoubtedly worth watching. This movie isn't flawless, and it's probably not really unique, but it's still a lot of fun and gives the idea a new spin. The humor is occasionally excellent and the characters are likable. Simply said, it's exciting and enjoyable. Very entertaining.
Leave us alone!
But we've just started.
The Strangers, Prey at Night, 2018. Dollface, the Man in the Mask, and Pin-Up Girl, three horrifying masked psychopaths, have selected their newest victims 10 torturous years after the intimidation and murder at the Hoyts' home in The Strangers, 2008. As Mike, Cindy and their kids, Kinsey and Luke, go to Lake Gatlin to stay the night with their Uncle Marvin, en route to Kinsey's remote boarding school, the ruthless strangers attack their front door with the intention to murder them. As the ongoing night of evil hits once more, another family must fight bravely to live. Who will triumph in this ferocious battle for life, and who will perish? We already know the three strangers who are dressed in humorous masks or hoods with painted smiles are deadly serious because of the original. This sequel's interesting feature is that it is a standalone. We don't need to know that these individuals are cruel, cold-blooded murderers from the original movie's conclusion. An unexpected oddity, The Strangers, Prey at Night, is a sequel that simultaneously improves upon and corrects the flaws of its predecessor. Robert's mastery of mood setting and relentless pacing, together with some strong performances, makes this a scary and really terrifying horror movie. The Ranger, 2018. The Ranger is a movie that Jen Wexler both wrote and directed. In it, Chloe Levine plays a punk who sneaks out of her late uncle's home in a national forest with her companions under the influence of a hallucinogenic called Echo to avoid the cops. Jeremy Holm plays the titular park ranger who reacts erratically and hides a sinister secret. According to Wexler, the idea behind the movie is to mix the genres of 80s punk flicks with 80s slashers. This was, on the whole, quite a good and pleasant attempt. The fact that this one really works hard to make the central group a product of their surroundings contributes to some of the enjoyment. Although not the warmest and most charming, the opening shots of them at their underground clubs, using drugs and essentially living by their own rules, put them up as the kind of group we are going to follow. The excellent slasher set pieces in the movie then have more of an effect as a result. Pieces, 1982. Pieces was directed by Juan Piquer Simon, who also directed the 1988 movie Slugs. While working on a jigsaw, a teenage boy's mother restrains him, which causes him to kill her and cut her carcass with an axe. 4 decades later, on the campus of a Boston university, a psychopath murders young ladies, dismembers their bodies, steals body pieces from each student, and then puts each piece together to form a human jigsaw puzzle. Lieutenant Bracken reaches an agreement with the dean of the college. Agent Mary Riggs breaks into the institution pretending to be a tennis coach, and she collaborates with the student Kendall to find the culprit. Gorehounds won't be disappointed by this bizarre and slightly eccentric 80s slasher, famous for being the UK's video nasty list. Even though Pieces has its faults, it nevertheless offers plenty of blood and guts for a low-budget horror film. With the exception of Christopher George, who plays a police detective and gives an excellent performance, the overdubbing and acting are generally terrible. There are also sluggish moments and subplots that don't progress. But I digress. Pieces is a fantastic example of a grindhouse entertainment, with a ton of nudity and some amazing modern gore.
Where my money is? Where is it?
The Funhouse, 1981. Directed by Tobe Hooper, the movie revolves around Amy Harper, Buzz Clement, Richie Atterbury, and Liz Duncan, 4 teenagers who go to the newly arrived carnival to have fun. Liz suggests that they spend the night at the funhouse as the evening draws to a close. They all decide to go to the final ride before the attraction closes. The 4 see a horrifying murder committed by a huge guy wearing a Frankenstein mask on a psychic reader while they are staying at the funhouse. Richie also steals part of the money the funhouse owner makes. The owner, who is enraged by the stolen money, sends Gunther, his son, who also killed the reader, to deal with the thieves. The 4 of them are imprisoned within the amusement park and are being murdered one by one. The Funhouse is a fantastic suspenseful horror movie that is far smarter than most of its kind, especially when contrasted to the majority of the splatter movies of the time. The narrative is compelling and creates a great deal of tension up to its cramped conclusion. As he did with the first Texas Chainsaw, Hooper creates a tense environment for us with the help of some eye-catching set pieces. Hooper transforms the carnival into a terrifying, sinister underworld. The musical composition is really dramatic and dark. The Final Girls, 2015. Directed by Todd Strauss-Schulson, the movie narrates the story of Max and her companions who are unwittingly drawn into the movie when they grudgingly attend a tribute screening of a notorious 80s slasher movie that stars Max's late mother. They quickly understand that they are within the cult classic movie and that they must cooperate with the counselors from the fictional Camp Bloodbath, including Max's mother in the role of the shy Scream Queen, to fight the machete-wielding masked murderer. Who will be the final girls who survive this movie as the death toll rises in the classic moment after the iconic scene? This horror comedy is ideal for anyone who wants to watch horror without feeling too afraid and have a little fun along the way, despite the poster and synopsis looking ridiculously stupid. The virgin who survives, the flashback origin narrative, the stalking killer appearing through windows, and the strength of the final girl were all there in this great parody and tribute to teen slasher movies. The performance of the cast was outstanding since they were spot-on representations of their character types. The movie also features impressive special effects, camera work, and a background score. Tenebrae, 1982. Written and directed by Dario Argento, the movie tells the story of Peter Neal, a well-known American author from Rhode Island, who goes from New York to Rome to publicize his most recent bestseller, Tenebrae. His agent, Bulma, greets him and arranges for him to appear on a talk program. As soon as Peter gets there, a shoplifter is killed, and Detective Germani is given the case. When he comes across Peter, he tells him that the crime was committed because the perpetrator was motivated by his book. Soon after, Peter receives a letter from the killer. 2 lesbians are killed. According to the murderer's writing, perverts must be removed, and Peter suspects the show's presenter. But if you take away the impossible, what's left may be the reality. Torso was directed and co-written by Italian director Sergio Martino. The movie narrates the story of a serial murderer who is suffocating college students in Perugia. The sole lead in the inquiry, according to Inspector Martino, is a scarf and the colors black and red. Gianni Tommaso, a street seller selling scarves, is questioned about his memory of possible scarf purchasers, but he replies that he is not sure. Gianni becomes the murderer's next victim once he is blackmailed. In the meantime, Jane, Daniela, Katia and Ursula, 4 college students and girlfriends, travel to a remote villa to spend a few days together during a break from their Professor Franz's art history lectures. Franz has become friends with Jane. Dr. Roberto is called when Jane twists her ankle and tells her to take it easy. Torso is a spectacular giallo. Even if some of the special effects are a touch lacking, the movie succeeds in keeping the audience invested in the story, and its positive aspects greatly exceed its slight flaws. The film by Sergio Martino features some real edge-of-your-seat moments. A cast full of lovely women, an outstanding score by Guido and Maurizio De Angelis, and stunning photography. April Fool's Day, 1986. Directed by Fred Walton, the movie revolves around 8 college students joining together to celebrate their last year of school at an island estate owned by heiress Muffy St. John. They quickly learn that each of them has a prior secret that has been disclosed. And then 2 of them mysteriously disappear. But are they actually gone? Or is it just a nasty April Fool joke that is really genuine? The only person who appears to be aware of what is happening is the hostess, Muffy. But is she truly the one murdering in the end? It's easy to see why this movie has gained a small following, given its deft blending of an Agatha Christie-style mystery, teen horror film cliches, and offbeat humor. Even non-horror moviegoers can find this clever and sinister little endeavor to their liking. Walton does an excellent job in creating a spooky and mysterious atmosphere for the movie. The beautiful Charles Bernstein music score further enhances the ambience. The video is artfully filmed in stunning British Columbia. Prom Night, 1980. The truth of what happened to Robin Hammond on the day her shattered corpse was discovered next to an abandoned convent has been kept secret by Hamilton High School students Jade Cunningham, Kelly Lynch, Nick McBride and Wendy Richards for 6 long years. The 4 didn't reveal their taunting of Robin, backing her into a corner until she was afraid and standing on a windowsill, at which point she plunged to her death. Even though it was an accident, the 12-year-olds were afraid of being blamed and pledged never to tell. However, someone else was present that day and was observing. This person is now prepared to exact lethal retribution on prom night. In her 3rd appearance as a scream queen, Jamie Lee Curtis stars in a respectable little slasher mystery, Prom Night. Leslie Nielsen plays both the principal of Hamilton High School and Jamie Lee's father in the film. The rest of the cast are only supporting actors, but we must remember that this movie stars one of the evilest you-know-what-is in slasher movie history. The film is undoubtedly quite cheesy and shoddily created, but that just adds to its appeal. The tension is present, the music is genuinely unsettling, and Jamie Lee does her thing. Terror Train 1980. Terror Train is about a group of students holding a New Year's Eve costume party on a train without realizing that a masked murderer is on board with the intention of killing them. The movie is a claustrophobic development on a moving train. Terror Train is considered less gory than most slasher films and is focused on a different sort of horror. There are both psychological as well as supernatural elements in the movie. The technical aspects of the film are considered superior than the average slasher film. Some watchers have felt that the train is masterfully used as the star of the movie. The movie received mixed reviews upon release but did well commercially, earning $8 million at the box office over an estimated budget of $3.5 million. The film's atmosphere, full of suspense as well as its acting, has received positive feedback. The visual effects of the film, both special effects and the makeup, received a lot of praise. The chief criticism of the film centered on predictability and lack of innovation in the movie. All in all, Terror Train has attained a cult status in the slasher genre. A remake of the film was made in 2022.
Hey guys, is that...
There's no serial killer running.
Spirit Camp 2009. Spirit Camp is a horror comedy movie in which a goth girl attends cheerleading camp as part of a prison rehab sentence and has a hard time dealing with her peers. However, suddenly when girls start turning up dead, these rivals must put aside their differences to join forces and solve this mystery involving a psychopathic killer. The humor in the movie is considered quite subtle. It is considered a throwback movie with a lot of nostalgic value. Spirit Camp was a fan favorite movie upon release. Critics praised its visuals and acting performances. Its director, Kerry Bayer, was praised for his direction and cinematography. Spirit Camp's expert use of horror tropes was lauded. The only negative criticism was based on many plot holes. There was also no explanation of the movie of many of the antagonists. The kills were mostly off-screen, which was liked by some and disliked by others. Overall, Spirit Camp remains an indie slasher classic. It has often been called cheesy and a combination of nudity and murder. It is a timeless nod to the 80s slashers. Madman 1982. A mysterious axe-wielding murderer at a summer camp is the main narrative of the movie. The counselors of said summer camp are spookily killed off one by one, and this pressing mystery of Madman Mars must be solved. The characters are very well defined, each with deep backgrounds. The movie is considered much underrated. It is quite weird and throws us off guard. However, it is universally considered well written and well shot. It was created during a fertile period of slasher movie generation and yet managed to stand out. Madman has a lot of simple pleasures like attention to detail. There is a lot of ghoulish imagery as well. The horror may not be very vivid, but the production is of high value. The cinematography, colors, sharpness and skin tones have been lauded. Madman is considered quite charming. Madman received critical acclaim and did well commercially, earning around $1.3 million. The film focuses more on establishing a scary and suspenseful ambience rather than relying on violence and gore. The acting performances received a lot of praise, especially that of Galen Ross. The soundtrack and creepy sound effects composed by Leslie Newman were also lauded. The overall use of the film's locations in establishing a sense of mystery has been specifically praised. Cult status has been achieved by this slasher movie. The only but of criticism is centered around its predictable plot and sometimes hammy acting. Fright 2007. Fright is an emotional slasher movie about a sheriff whose worst nightmare comes true when his homicidal and insane son, who had murdered his own mother many years ago, escapes from a psychiatric institution. The protagonist, Gary, who was the security guard of that psychiatric institution, vows to find him and is soon hunted down by the deranged and psychopathic antagonist's son as a dark secret about his evil past is exposed. The film contains one of the most graphically brutal scenes captured in movies. This scene became quite viral. The film was made on a small budget with novice actors. The movie is considered very mind-twisting and even confusing. The camera tricks used in the movie are considered spectacular. The film is quite heavy on plot twists. Fright achieved moderate commercial success. The film's concept and plot were praised, although some considered it an amalgamation of several Halloween movie plots. The intensity of the movie, especially its gory kills, received positive feedback from most critics. The chief criticism of the film was based on its pacing and some of the dialogue. Overall, the movie cultivated interest among slasher movie watchers and generated a demand for a sequel. Rabies, 2010. Rabies is about a group of friends who had gone hiking in the countryside. The movie begins with a young man being attacked in the forest. As the movie progresses, a group of friends find themselves hunted down by a psychopathic monster with rabies. The personalities of the members of the group in the movie are quite distinct, and that leads to interesting moments during critical situations. The film has a lot of intense and suspenseful moments which keeps the viewer on edge. The film also highlights the need for necessary safety equipment and adequate preparation for the worst. The visuals of the film, especially its cinematography, have been widely praised. The musical score of the film is said to have majorly contributed to the movie's suspenseful experience. The film's twist ending and climactic scenes have a deep impact on the watcher. The movie's use of red herrings has also been praised. The pacing of the movie and acting performances received special mention. All in all, Rabies is quite a thrilling and well-made horror movie that is considered one of the best ever produced in Israeli cinema. Its influence on current and future storytellers in Israel has been profound. Alone in the Dark, 1982. Alone in the Dark takes place in the ruins of a haunted mansion, where a family is threatened by 4 escaped mental patients during a power blackout. A team of doctors experiment on patients to find out whether or not they are to be considered mentally fit. However, several patients escape and take the psychiatrists as hostage in an abandoned haunted mansion. The patients, each with a range of mental issues, start terrorizing the hostages, who have to rely on their own instincts and ingenuity to escape. The leader of the patients is an idealistic but formidable man, Kraus, who is determined to rid the world of everything impure. Alone in the Dark was highly regarded by fans of its day and did well at the box office. The audience is taken on a constant up and down ride of suspense and intensity. The writing of the movie was praised, especially how well written its characters were. The acting performances of the main cast were praised, especially that of Jack Palance, who portrayed Kraus. Overall, the movie does an excellent job of creating tension and unease. The only criticism centered on predictability of plot twists. Nonetheless, Alone in the Dark has managed to create an enduring legacy. The New York Ripper, 1982. The New York Ripper is an Italian horror film following the adventures of a sadistic serial killer who is prolifically murdering young women all across New York City. The police have no idea as to who this murderer could be. A new lieutenant on the job joins forces with a psychologist to help solve the mystery. The film contains a lot of graphic content as well as violence, which has gotten embroiled in a decent amount of controversy before and after its release. While some have called the violence and gore unnecessary, others have called it artistic. Some critics have called the film misogynistic, although that is an arguable statement. Some have used the term hardcore horror for it. The New York Ripper is considered one of the best horrors in all of Italian cinema and a great example of the classic giallo film. The film has been called tightly scripted and its production values were praised. Criticism was centered on the killer's identity being easily guessed and an overall letdown in the mystery aspect. The film, despite being called sleazy and controversial, has been described as the classic representation of the world of its creator, Lucio Fulci. Overall, it has earned its cult status across the world.
The heat of their bodies was the magnet that would draw the terror.
Just Before Dawn, 1981. Just Before Dawn is about a group of 5 friends who journey on a backpacking trip through the rugged wilderness of the Oregon and are led by a mysterious figure known as the Guide. The deeper they go into the wilderness, the stranger and more unsettling are the things that start to happen to the group, to the point that it becomes evident that some deadly force is out to get them. The movie is mainly about how the group attempts to survive in this remote forest. The wilderness itself becomes a character in the movie, creating a sense of unexplored danger and imminent isolation. Just Before Dawn was not a commercial success, but it was enjoyed both by fans and critics. The suspenseful atmosphere of the movie, especially aided by its cinematography, received a lot of positive feedback. It has been called one of the most underrated slasher movies of all time. The major plot twist in the movie has been described as very innovative. The acting performances also received their due praise, especially John Hunsaker as the creepy villain. The camera work is considered one of the strongest aspects of the movie. Just Before Dawn is more restrained in its use of gore than the typical slasher movie, and that is considered one of its hallmarks. Overall, it has achieved the status of a classic horror film. Dr. Giggles, 1992. Dr. Giggles is a horror movie about a deranged doctor in a small town who manages to escape psychiatric imprisonment and starts murdering people. The movie is named after the high-pitched giggle that the doctor lets out every time he kills. There are a lot of graphic deaths in the movie, as well as many jump scares. The genre is clearly exaggerated, with some kills being quite inventive. The movie is slightly slow initially, but picks up, especially in the second half. Dr. Giggles was praised to be a good mixture of thrill and suspense. The acting performances of the movie received top praise, especially Larry Drake, who acted as the main villain, Dr. Giggles. His performance was described as both convincing and haunting. The film's use of dark humor also makes it stand out. The story has been described as well scripted, as well as the characters. The comedic elements of Dr. Giggles were also said to have added to the overall experience. All in all, the film was said to be a humorous and eerie experience to watch. It has established its position as a classic in the horror genre. Blood and Black Lace, 1964. Blood and Black Lace is considered to be one of the earliest examples of the Italian giallo genre, which is characterized by its use of black-gloved killers, distinctive violence, and psychological thrills. The story involves a fashion house owned by a wealthy countess. There is a mysterious murder of one of the models, as well as a lot of cryptic clues that have been left behind in the process. As investigation into the mysterious mounts, people and co-workers begin to turn on each other. The film's chief theme is its use of violence and gore, a fact that made it quite controversial at the time of its release. Blood and Black Lace was shot at a time where portrayal of gore and violence were not common. Hence, a lot of critics and fans criticized what they deemed unnecessary parts of the movie. Others defended the violence and gore of the movie, finding them to be artistic and establishing tension and mood. The kills in the movie were shot in a highly stylized and surreal manner. Blood and Black Lace is credited with establishing many of the conventions of the giallo genre. Its cinematography and plot have also received very positive feedback. It is considered a genre-defining film in murder and horror, and is duly respected as a classic. Girls Gone Dead, 2012. Girls Gone Dead is a parody of the slasher genre where a group of 7 friends are celebrating their spring break on a secluded island until they begin to get stalked and killed by a mysterious and medieval murderer. The film is a blend of the comedic elements as well as the classic slasher formula. The characters are exaggerated and stereotypical. The sense of humor is meta, that is, self-referential, as well as paying a homage to the slasher genre. It lends perspective on the nature and direction of slasher movies, both to horror fans and the audience at large. Girls Gone Dead has been praised for its colourful and distinct look, as well as its cinematography. This vibrant energy, as opposed to dark energy, makes it stand out among usual slasher movies. The energetic soundtrack of the movie is also instrumental in building mood and creating suspense. Girls Gone Dead has been praised for its fresh take on the slasher genre and for inspiring future franchises of movies like Scary Movie. Criticism of the movie was based on its lack of central character development. The odd special effects in the film have also been praised. Midnight Movie, 2008. Midnight Movie is set in a small theatre where a strange film is being shown in the middle of the night. As the audience watches, they realize that events from the movie are slowly becoming true in real life and that they are in great danger. There is a sense of uneasiness throughout the film, along with suspense and tension. The character building of the movie garnered great praise. People who mistook it for not a serious film were surprised at how engrossing the mysteries in the movie actually turned out to be. Midnight Movie manages to establish an eerie atmosphere with its highly technical use of cinematography. There are subtle moments of violence as well as glaring jump scares. The soundtrack of the movie is ambient and quite haunting. The sound effects like doors creaking and footsteps shuffling were especially well done. The overall sense of fear and dread that is present throughout the film has been praised to have been quite consistent. All in all, despite being a small budget movie of not that huge a scale, Midnight Movie has managed to become a classic among horror and slasher movies.
What? You left the 7-10 split.
Jack Frost, 1997. Jack Frost is a horror comedy movie following the life of serial killer Jack Frost, who is transformed into a snowman after a freak accident involving genetics research. Viewers follow the movie as Jack tries to regain his human form. The film's blend of dark humor and horror, especially with witty one-liners, has been widely praised. The success and popularity of the movie led to a sequel being released in 2000. The movie was praised for being extremely creative and a semi-parody. The pacing of the movie, ultimately ending in a rousing finale, was quite well done. A phrase that was often used to describe Jack Frost was entertainingly bad. Jack Frost's use of special effects earned a lot of praise, as did its upbeat and lively music. The look and sound of a snowman were well captured according to critics and fans. The film did quite well, especially for being made on a low budget. The performance and dedication of the film's actors were also praised. The comical death sequences of the movie also garnered attention. The film was panned by critics overall, but its popularity with the fans ultimately led it to achieve cult status.
Ray, you are not invited.
Happy Birthday to Me, 1981. Happy Birthday to Me is a Canadian slasher movie that follows some high school students who are one by one killed off by a mysterious killer. The film is set against the backdrop of a prestigious institution, and a group of its popular students are being targeted. A key element of Happy Birthday to Me is its use of suspense and tension, keeping the audience on the fence till the very end. There is the presence of a lot of shock and horror elements in the movie where the violence is very brutal. The conclusion of the film is said to be dark and quite satisfying by many. Happy Birthday to Me performed well, both commercially and critically. Its storyline, filled with good twists, received positive feedback. The director was praised for having successfully given the film a dark and atmospheric feel. The wonderfully moody musical score was also praised and added value to the narration as it unfolded. The acting performances in the film were lauded. Criticism was centered chiefly on the plot getting confusing at times. The murders have been described as original and gory. Overall, Happy Birthday to Me has attained the status of a slasher classic. Nightmare, 1981. Nightmare follows the story of a mentally unstable man who has been released from a mental institution following treatment for violent and disturbing nightmares. However, the man is unable to get hold of himself and starts acting out his violent fantasies in real life. Nightmare was embroiled in a lot of controversy upon release and was even banned in certain places. The graphic depictions of violence and gore were considered quite extreme even for someone who enjoys horror movies, and could thus be shocking and/or disturbing. The film was described as not one for the faint of heart. The cinematography of the movie has been specifically praised for many well-crafted shots depicting the nightmare-like atmosphere of the film. The film explores various complex themes such as mental illness and how much it can influence violence. The movie also explores the responsibility one has for one's actions, situations that are made especially interesting when heinous crimes are committed by people with mental illnesses. Overall, Nightmare's deep exploration of nightmares and the amount of power they hold over a person's mind is frighteningly insightful. It has thus earned its status of being a standout horror movie. Cold Prey 2006. Cold Prey is a Norwegian slasher movie about a group of friends on a skiing trip in the mountains, finding themselves in an abandoned hotel after one of them gets injured. While searching for help, they realize that they are not alone and some mysterious entity is hunting them down. The film opens with this group entering the hotel as they are stalked by an unseen and unknown figure. Cold Prey is famous for its use of sudden jump scares and violent attacks to keep the audience nervous. The conclusion of the movie is said to be very intense as well as satisfying. The film's cinematography has been widely praised to have successfully created the sensation of both isolation and fear by expertly using the image of vast and far-reaching mountains. The themes of existential survival as well as the consequences of one's actions play a pivotal role in guiding the narrative of the movie. There is effective use of sound to create tension and suspense. Criticism of the movie centered on parts of it being too predictable. The film's acting and characterizations also received considerable praise. The popularity of the film, especially on a global scale, led to the development of multiple sequels in the coming years. Satan's Little Helper 2004. Satan's Little Helper is a horror comedy film about the Halloween adventures of a little boy. Mysteriously enough, he encounters a stranger who claims to be Satan and offers to help him trick or treat. Satan's Little Helper becomes popular chiefly due to its masterful ability of blending dark humor and satire with frightening moments. The film's writing was deemed to be witty and clever. Satan's Little Helper proved to be noted slasher director Jim Lieberman's directorial comeback after 17 years. A strong aspect of the film is its stellar acting performances by all of its principal actors. The film's two leads do an excellent job bringing the necessary innocence as well as mischief in order to portray their characters. Criticism was based on the unoriginal nature of parts of the plot, as well as some of the jokes. The movie offered a different and interesting take on the holiday of Halloween. Some plot twists in the narrative were described as ingenious. Overall, the humor of the movie, along with its characterization, proved to be the strongest attraction for audiences. The film's horror elements were deemed by many to be too much for children, although the humor was fine.
Don't open the door. And don't whatever you do.
Eyes of a Stranger 1981. Eyes of a Stranger is a thriller horror film following the story of a woman who is suspicious that her neighbor might be a serial killer and rapist. The film is full of intense and frightening moments carefully designed to keep the audience at the edge of their seats. The film has been described both as scary and quite disturbing. Throughout the film, the main character becomes increasingly isolated and scared, fearing for her life. The lead performance by Lauren Tews received overwhelming praise as emotionally charged and convincing, as did the performances of her other co-actors. The tense and suspenseful atmosphere of the movie, aided by its masterful cinematography, received a lot of praise. The film's musical score was praised to have successfully created a dark and eerie ambience. The film was not as gory as the run-of-the-mill slasher movie, but was considered unusually well made from a technical point of view. The makeup of the movie also received special praise. Criticism of the film centered on inconsistent pacing as well as extreme depiction of sexual violence. Overall, across time, due to its strong acting and solid technical foundations, Eyes of a Stranger has become a classic in horror movie history. Slaughterhouse 1987. Slaughterhouse takes place in an abandoned slaughterhouse that is acting as a nightmarish trap for a certain group of people. This diverse group includes a cop, a journalist, as well as criminals who must all use their wits in order to escape this tricky place. The movie begins from the perspective of an escaped convict who stumbles upon the slaughterhouse and is locked inside along with various people who have each been locked for different reasons. They soon realize that the slaughterhouse is home to terrifying mutant creatures that are soon about to hunt them down. As the group tries to escape, they must encounter various obstacles and puzzles, all the while escaping from these mutant creatures that are quick and silent. Slaughterhouse has been praised for a strong cast of characters and solid performances. The practical effects and stop-motion animation used for creating the monsters received a lot of positive feedback. The film was lauded to have built tension and suspense with consistent pacing and sudden bursts of action. The humor of the movie, often dark in nature, also received special mention. The theme of the movie is based on survival and the human condition. Slaughterhouse is thus a classic example of an 80s horror movie that blends many factors together successfully in order to create a truly horrifying experience.
Don't do this. Don't do this. Oh God, no!
Shredder, 2001. Shredder takes us to a small ski resort town where a group of teenagers are partying and snowboarding till they realize that they are being pursued by a mysterious assailant. There is also the presence of a shredder machine that swiftly disposes of anyone in its path. The film uses technology as a source of terror by portraying the shredder machine to be a highly complex and advanced piece of equipment. It is depicted as an almost unstoppable force. This aspect of the movie is particularly relevant as technology plays an ever-increasing role in our lives. Shredder has been praised for its quick-paced action and narrative. The creative use of camera and sound has garnered a lot of positive feedback. The dark humor of the movie, used especially in the context of group dynamics among the characters, has been well received. The importance of teamwork in survival has also been highlighted in the film. The script's characters and their respective acting performances have been lauded. The film's effects seem outdated 20 years later, but its timeless technological theme is only becoming increasingly relevant as the years go by. The film continues to be a classic in the slasher film genre. American Gothic, 1988. American Gothic follows 6 vacationing adults who are forced to land their plane on a remote island. This includes a woman, Cynthia, who has been traumatized by the drowning of her baby. They encounter the religiously fanatical and strict Ma and Pa, as well as their mentally odd children. The film is based on a very famous painting of the same name and delves on dark themes such as incest, infanticide, and necrophilia. The film is considered a satire on traditional family values. The film seems to be aimed towards much more mature horror viewing audience, as common 80s horror tropes were not used very much. The production values of the movie were praised. American Gothic received a lot of praise for its sharp direction and crisp cinematography. The acting performances, especially that of the 2 lead actors, were considered stellar and the foundation of the success of the movie. The tight script and eerie music also received special praise. The handling of complex themes in the movie has been done very well. The presence of great plot twists and a satisfying conclusion have been commended. The film might look dated to a younger audience, but its topic is a tried and tested formula. The character development in the movie was especially highlighted, with focus on the characters of Pa, Ma, and Cynthia. Return to Horror High, 1987. A movie is being filmed by a movie crew about a series of horrific murders that had taken place at a high school years earlier. However, as filming proceeds, the people find themselves targeted by someone who will go to terrible lengths to stop the movie from being made. This is deemed to be the ghost of the original killer. The film is an interesting blend of humor and satire with horror. The movie also uses the act of filmmaking to generate horror. Characters are constantly aware of the camera and the audience is given a behind-the-scenes look. It provides us a look at fear from a filmmaking perspective and how it can be manipulated. Return to Horror High received success and acclaim as an entertaining and unique horror comedy. Its cast and their performances were praised. The soundtrack of the movie, which was quite ambient, received special mention. The film was heavily commended as an artful intersection of horror and comedy, as well as a very in-depth look into the process of filmmaking. Camera angles of the movie were praised, as was the use of offbeat gore. The chief criticism was based on confusion about the narrative as felt by some. Overall, Return to Horror High carved its place among the slasher sensations of the 80s.
All victims appeared to be virgins.
Cherry Falls, 2000. Cherry Falls takes place in a small town of Cherry Falls, which gets thrown into panic when a killer starts targeting local virgin high school students, and a group of students attempt to stop and identify him. The town is portrayed as a very close-knit community, and the recent murders have taken a tremendous toll on the health of this community. The students in the movie are a diverse group of characters, with humor being the glue that holds their social dynamics together. A key aspect of Cherry Falls is its exploration of sexual violence, and it delves into the idea of sexual innocence and how that can be destroyed using violence. Cherry Falls was praised for its atmosphere and strong sense of suspense. The lighting and camera work were praised to be very creative. The tense soundtrack of the movie also garnered praise. There is a latent unease that permeates the whole movie as well as the whole town. The strong, young cast of actors also received wholesome praise. Cherry Falls has been called one of the most creative slasher movies ever made. There was controversy regarding censorship certification of the original theatrical release of the movie, prompting it to become a much more popular item on television. A spiritual successor of the movie, Freaky, was released 2 decades later in 2020. Gutterballs, 2008. Gutterballs is a horror comedy film about a late-night bowling tournament amongst a group of friends when suddenly a masked murderer starts pursuing them. The film features a lot of exaggerated gore and sexualized content, all of which is portrayed through the lens of humor. A power outage happens and one of the players turns up dead. In this panic, the group must figure out who is responsible for the murder, as well as escape from the bowling alley. There are several obstacles along the way, as well as suspicious people, as the group navigates their way to their escape. The film has one of the highest uses of linguistic profanity among all movies. Gutterballs became popular for its exaggerated camera and sound effects, as well as bright and vivid lighting. The dark sense of humor of the film and tongue-in-cheek references to popular culture received positive feedback. The gore in the movie also received praise, as did the overall atmosphere of fear and suspense. Criticism about the movie centered on some of the acting performances and prolonged rape scenes. All in all, the movie became popular and did decent enough business for a sequel called Balls Deep in 2015. Visiting Hours. Visiting Hours is the story of a young feminist journalist admitted to the hospital after an attack by a mysterious assailant. While recovering in the hospital, she realizes that her attacker has followed her there and is attacking other patients as well. The backdrop of the hospital is isolated and impersonal, making the characters there very vulnerable. The protagonist is initially attacked because of her strong and outspoken views, and despite remaining in a hospital, she refuses to back down in her quest to identify the attacker and bring him to justice. She is assisted in her mission by many nurses and doctors who are all part of the attacker's target. The feminist themes of the movie constitute a key part of it. Visiting Hours received a lot of praise as suspenseful and frightening. The film uses a variety of creative techniques in order to consistently maintain tension and thrill. These range from specific close-up, low-angle camera work to a very ambient musical score. The film did well commercially but ran into trouble with censorship issues. Criticism of the movie was based on it being clumsy during certain parts, as well as some extremist feminist themes. Overall, Visiting Hours holds its place in the pantheon of psychological slasher movies.
Come on, my beauties. That's
Motel Hell. Motel Hell is set in a rural town and is about a farmer who runs a motel and meatpacking business. Things seem normal till it becomes evident that the farmer is using his motel guests for meat as human sausages. The film is filled with dark and twisted humor, both with its characters and narration. There is a lot of graphic violence shown, ranging from gore to chainsaw action. Despite this, the film attempts to maintain its humor throughout. The original script of the movie was even darker, containing controversial elements such as bestiality. One of the most praised elements of Motel Hell has been its haunting music and memorable characters. Its theme song became quite popular. The pacing and climax of the film were criticized. The film is considered a parody of various slasher movies of the past. The direction of the movie was praised, especially the positive use of stereotypes. The cinematography is also considered of high quality. The idyllic setting with the farm and the lake was praised as being comfortable. The strong performance of Rory Calhoun is considered the anchor for the movie. It has managed to achieve cult status amongst slasher films. Unhinged, 1982. The film Unhinged has gained a lot of attention as well as notoriety and is about three young women who get stalked by an unknown murderer after they are forced to stay in a strange mansion. It has often been favorably compared to the legendary Hitchcock movie Psycho. The climax of the movie is considered quite shocking and unexpected. The theme of the movie is repression and gender dysphoria. The cast of the movie is made up of local amateur actors. It ran into a lot of censorship issues during the time of its original release. The writing and directing in Unhinged received quite a lot of praise. The acting performances, despite not being by professional actors, were deemed to have been strong. The pacing of the movie received criticism as it affected the sense of tension negatively. The film does not contain too much gore, especially compared to slasher movies of the time. The scripting of certain twists in the plot of the movie has been widely praised. The movie of the film also contributes to its ambience. Despite being a low-budget movie, Unhinged became quite popular and did decently at a commercial level. A remake of the movie was released many decades later in 2017. The Town That Dreaded Sundown, 1976. The Town That Dreaded Sundown is a horror movie based upon the crimes of a real-life, unidentified serial killer known as the Phantom Killer. The killer is depicted as a masked man with an iconic hooded cloak, making him hard to spot. The film deeply explores the theme of moral decay. The killer is even portrayed as a vigilante, punishing people for their crimes and misdeeds. This imagery is done using black and white photography, giving the movie a distinctive noir feel. The Town That Dreaded Sundown used beautiful geographic locations and advanced techniques to create vivid and memorable shots. The hooded cloak worn by the killer in the movie has become an iconic symbol of horror cinema. The soundtrack of the movie was also praised for being haunting. The suspense, thrill, and authenticity of the movie have received a universal positive feedback. Criticism of the movie centered on its graphic content, as well as the exploitative use of real-life names and locations. Despite its drawbacks, The Town That Dreaded Sundown is regarded as a memorable entry in the slasher movie universe. A sequel to the movie possessing the same name was released many decades later in 2014.
Make it even tighter.
Stop it! I'll do whatever you want.
Cutting Glass, 1989. Cutting Glass is a black comedy horror movie that was released direct to video and is known for being the first major role of the popular actor Brad Pitt. A psychotic youth is released from a mental institution and a string of murders of both teachers and students takes place. The mystery involves whether this crazed youth has any connection with these crimes or is there a different killer. The film is popular for its implausible but clever climax. Cutting Glass is often ignored by hardcore fans but is considered quite underrated. The acting is considered decent, but the narrative is deemed quite strong. The script really tries and largely succeeds in keeping the identity of the killer a secret till the very end. Brad Pitt's performance in the movie was not particularly remarkable, but Jill Sherlin received praise for her role. There is an element of gore in the movie, but nothing over the top. The film received some harsh reviews, but has managed to endure in popularity, especially in the slasher genre. Tourist Trap, 1979. Tourist Trap is a story of a group of young friends who become trapped in an abandoned museum where mannequins decide to come to life. An unknown killer with telekinetic powers stalks them and decides to kill them. The group, while driving through the countryside, comes across a museum called the Museum of the Bizarre and become very curious. The owner, however, starts becoming very hostile and erratic, and soon enough, the group finds itself trapped. The group attempts to unravel the mystery of the museum, mannequins being a way to kill unsuspecting visitors and entrap consciousness. Tourist Trap was noted particularly for its eerie atmosphere and atmospheric music. The visuals and cinematography of the movie also earned a lot of praise, especially that of the museum owner by actor Chuck Connors. Criticism was based on some portions of the movie feeling unsettling to some.
Put your hands on top of your head.
New Year's Evil, 1980. New Year's Evil is a slasher movie centered on a New Year's Eve TV special where a crazy killer is determined to kill one person for each hour leading up to midnight. The police try to race against time in their bid to foil the efforts of this madman. The film is a very good example of building a tense and suspenseful atmosphere as well as urgency and danger. There are also a number of graphic and gory death scenes in the movie. New Year's Evil received praise for being a plain and old-fashioned thriller. Roz Kelly, among other actors, received a lot of praise for her leading role. The music of the film became hugely popular, with the theme song attaining cult status. There is a lot of shock and thrill in the movie for critics and fans alike. Criticism of the film was based on the plot and twists not being very innovative. The killer's motive is never quite adequately explained. Overall, New Year's Evil remains a must-watch holiday slasher movie. Drive-Thru, 2007. Drive-Thru is a horror comedy involving a drive-thru fast food restaurant and featuring its murderous clown mascot. It has its share of blood and gore, but is mostly a movie based on dark humor. The film breaks a lot of slasher cliches and stereotypes. The film also does an interesting job in satirizing American youth culture, especially with regard to drugs, cops, and the government. Drive-Thru received praise not particularly as a scary movie, but as quite a funny one. The acting performances received solid praise, especially that by Leighton Meester. The villain is colourful and complex and is well played as a psycho villain. The main criticism of this movie was centred on what was thought to be a weak climax. The soundtrack has been praised. The film tries, and to a large extent succeeds, in distracting the viewer from some of its plot holes. The editing of the movie was considered to be quite creative. Number 96, Lover's Lane, 1999. Lover's Lane is an independently produced slasher film chronicling the life of a man who committed a series of murders several years ago and now has begun to hunt down his original victims' children. This movie is noted for being the debut of popular actress Anna Faris, who would later go on to do many slasher movies, including the very popular Scary Movie series. The film is reminiscent of the crazed slasher films of the 80s, filled with their cliched tropes and absurd plot twists. Lover's Lane has been critically acclaimed and called a simple, old-school slasher movie that is enjoyable. Anna Faris received a lot of praise for her first role. The gory elements of this movie are at a minimum, and most of the deaths happen off-screen. The low-budget feel of the film actually seems to play in its favour. Ultimately, the movie stays true to its slasher roots and is considered a modern horror classic. The Slayer, 1982. The Slayer follows a couple that gets trapped on an island due to a hurricane. There, they begin to experience strange and frightening occurrences, including vivid visions and nightmares. They conclude that they are being stalked by a supernatural force and set out to uncover the dark history of the island. The film manages to capture an eerie and suspenseful atmosphere interspersed with graphic death sequences intending to shock and thrill. The narrative of the movie is told in a non-linear order, allowing for multiple interpretations. The script does not resolve this fundamental issue of interpretation. The Slayer received critical acclaim as well as commercial success. Its cinematography UK was particularly noted for its stunning landscapes as well as spooky interiors. The performance of the acting cast had been considered particularly solid. Despite it being low budget, the film was considered straightforward and sophisticated. It was also praised to have a nightmarish quality. The film was controversial at the time of release in the UK due to censorship issues. Overall, it has become a cult classic and a must-see for slasher fans. The Boogeyman, 1980. The Boogeyman is the story of two kids involved in the murder of their mother's boyfriend, having inadvertently trapped his soul in a mirror, only to release it several years later. They are now targeted by the ghost and have to defeat it. The movie shares a lot of similarity and is inspired by several slasher movies of the past, like Halloween and The Exorcist. The Boogeyman was a box office success despite its limited release, earning several times its budget. The film had been called an unconventional take on the slasher film genre. The effectively eerie and suspenseful atmosphere of the film was praised, as was the ambient soundtrack. The stylistic similarities of the film with many classic films of the past have been called an homage by some and imitation by others. Overall, the film became quite popular and is now considered a classic. Two sequels were released in 1983 and 2004. Sorority Row, 2009. Sorority Row is a retelling of the 1982 classic slasher movie The House on Sorority Row. The plot of the movie is based on a sorority group that is stalked and murdered on the night of their graduation, just 8 months after covering up the accidental death of a fellow girl over a prank by making her death look like a suicide. As mysterious things start happening in their lives, the sisters realize that it is the ghost of their murdered friend who has come back for revenge. The girls try to find a way to lay the spirit of the ghost to rest and stop the murder of their group members one by one. The movie explores the themes of friendship, guilt, and redemption. Sorority Row was praised for the expert handling of its themes as well as its confident acting and directing. The suspenseful nature and thrill of the atmosphere was well maintained. The horror and drama elements of the movie were quite well balanced. The special effects in the film also received a lot of positive feedback. Criticism centered on parts of the plot being silly. The movie was very successful at the box office, earning more than double its budget. Despite the lack of stellar reviews, Sorority Row has earned himself the position of a slasher classic. The Dorm That Dripped Blood, 1982. The Dorm That Dripped Blood chronicles the lives of 4 college students as they decide to stay on campus over the Christmas holidays to clear out their dormitory, where an unknown assailant starts stalking them. Before being demolished, students are routinely tasked to clean a particular dormitory, but strange and supernatural things start to happen as a result. It is later revealed that these are being caused by the ghost of a student who died in the dorm many years ago and is now seeking revenge. The Dorm That Dripped Blood received positive feedback from fans as well as a portion of critics. The narration and direction of the movie had been praised, as was the relative tightness of the script. The ending of the movie was considered surprising by many. The tension and suspense are consistent throughout the movie and is well crafted. The effects of the movie were deemed impressive. The Dorm That Dripped Blood received universal praise for the handling of its central story theme, that is, the consequence of one's actions. Although the movie was not a critical darling, it became popular among slasher fans all over the globe and ultimately managed to earn the status of a classic. Marvelous Verdict. Slasher movies have been popular since the advent of filmmaking, primarily because they tap into our common cultural fears and anxieties, as well as explore our deepest, most unfulfilled fantasies. The distinctive good versus evil concept also appeals to us on a primal level. There is something about blood and fear that the human mind cannot easily look away from or avoid. Our dark and perverse curiosities are thus made into beautiful art through the medium of these movies, which have a large and dedicated fan base across the globe. It is an ever-evolving genre, with technological and cosmic horror becoming important and innovative subgenres at the turn of the century. Scary and interesting adventures await. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.